On today's episode of DBM, I'm going to teach you how to get rid of a whirring noise that comes from the engine bay of your car. And most likely, it's because of the alternator. Let me show you. As can be seen, there's the alternator, and if I were to give it some revs, you're going to hear a very distinct whirring noise. So let me do that for you guys. Since we've now determined that the noise is coming from your alternator, let's get to it and start working on this car. So as can be seen, there's the new alternator replacement that we're going to be fitting today on the car. And since we are messing with electrics, it's a good idea to take your battery off before doing any work whatsoever. Okay, and put a little cloth or something on it so there's no more connection. There we go. And let's help ourselves out and remove some other unneeded things that can get in the way of this fix, such as this engine cover. Should do it. There we go. And get rid of that. Now the next thing you want to do is you want to release the tensioner so we can get that belt off the alternator. And the way we're going to do this is there's a little nub here, as you can see. It sticks out, so you have the 3 screws for the tensioner here, and then right here there's a little nub. And what you're going to do in my case is you get a 17mm wrench and you put the end on here on the tensioner, and then you want to turn it to the right, so you'd want to turn it clockwise, and as you push and give leverage you can see that the belt goes off. Now I'm going to quickly do this with 2 hands as this is quite hard to do while filming, so I'll come back to you later. And as you can see, once you pull the tensioner over there, then you'll able to pull the belt right off. Now the most accessible bolt right now is this one at the top, and we're going to remove that with a 13mm socket. So let's get to it. Alright, onto the first bolt here. Let's see if I can crack this open. Okay, seems that that's never been off before, but it is now. Now once we got this bolt out, we're now going to tackle the bottom one, and that's a bit of a tricky one as it's pretty cramped in there, but it is a 17mm, so let's try to crack it. Do make sure to spray some WD-40 on there just to get it a bit looser for your convenience. Now it's very hard to see, but if you take this belt out of the way a little, you could see that the bolt is right there. Now that's a 17mm, and on the back, oh, there we go, you can really see I put an Allen key on it. That's an 8 size, and that one you have to put on there to be able to counteract the 17mm that I'll be unscrewing. And once you got that big bolt out on the bottom, you can see that you can now take the alternator out, hopefully. Another good idea would be to move this hose right here. By the time the alternator has to come out, which is now, you can then easily do so. Hose clamp down and take the hose out of the way. I'm going to put a blanket there or a cloth just in case, because I will get a little bit of spillage. Once you have the hose out of the way and all the bolts are out, you can see it's extremely loose. But first you need to disengage those 2 connectors. Now I moved the alternator a bit out of the way, but as you can see, this grounder has to be removed. That's a 13mm, and on the other side you have this grind. In my case you have another grounder here, and that's an 8mm bolt. So those 2 have to be removed before you can take out the whole alternator. The grounder comes right off. There we go. So out with the old and in with the new. I got it from a junkyard. Let's just hope that this thing is in better shape than the old one. Now that the used alternator is in place, we're now going to first undo the big bolt on the bottom, then we're going to do the upper bolt, and we're not going to tighten them extremely tight just yet, because I'll first try to get those 2 grounders back on. So you basically just reverse the process. Now once everything's nice and tight, the last thing you're going to want to do is put this hose back on. Now once that hose is back on, the last thing you're going to want to do is to put the belt back on the alternator. And like in the first step, use this little nub there, pull it this way to the right, and then it should give you enough slack put the belt back on the alternator. Now, it does take a little bit of pressure, but eventually you do get it back on. Make sure that's on properly. The nice thing about these pulleys is that you can see where the belt has been placed over time, so you can use this as a reference to see how the belts go on. Now the last thing we're going to want to do is put that engine cover back on, and then we're going to start the engine and see if we succeeded. And once you have the engine cover back on, let's proceed with putting the battery back. Back out socket. And there you go. Let's start her up and see how she goes. And it's gone.